people today. They could spend half their lives over 50. That's a lot of living. So it helps to have a wise friend and fierce defender in your corner. A friend like AARP. So your health lives longer.
This is just slow-mo karate?
Just slow-mo karate.
Your money lives longer.
I just bought that.
I just sold that.
And your happiness lives longer. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Join today.
Welcome to AARP Illinois' virtual event. It's so wonderful to have you with us. AARP is on a mission to connect with individuals across various communities, especially those aged 50 and above. We're here to listen, understand, and address the unique needs of you and your community as we age. Our goal is to enrich your experience by expanding our local activities, providing opportunities for you to discover and engage with all that life has to offer right here in your own community and virtually. As we journey through today's event, we invite you to consider joining our dedicated team of AARP volunteers. It's a chance to make a meaningful impact and help us better serve those 50 plus across the nation. Connect with us and be a part of this vibrant movement toward positive change. Welcome, and let's make this event both fun and transformative.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to AARP Illinois' special virtual event. Today, we are featuring a true living legend from our history books, Mrs. Harriet Tubman. Well, I'm your host, Teresa Jones, Associate State Director of Advocacy and Outreach with AARP Illinois. We are thrilled to have Mrs. Harriet Tubman here with us today. But before we dive into our discussion, let's get to know a little bit more about our remarkable guest. I do want to remind our audience that you have the opportunity to ask questions or make comments in our chat. We do welcome hearing from you. Now, Kathryn Harris, she began reenacting Harriet Tubman in the late 1990s, and she does so in this interview. So Harriet talks about her experiences as a conductor for the antebellum Underground Railroad. Over a period of roughly 10 years, Mrs. Tubman made nearly a score of trips to the slave states and to lead slaves to freedom in the North. She risked her own life and her own freedom each time she went south. But Miss Harris, she's portrayed Mrs. Tubman countless times, both to adult and children's groups. And at the conclusion of the interview, she will discuss a little bit about how this experience has enriched her own life. So, hello, Mrs. Tubman, and thank you for being here today to talk to our AARP audience. So,
thank you, Miss Jones.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Miss Jones, for inviting me. And I'm very pleased to be talking to your AARP audience about my life.
Well, thank you. Now, I'm not going to ask you a lot of questions because I just want you to tell us your story in your own way. So tell us about your life and from your slave name. Well, I think we talked about that in part one, but just for those that may have missed part one, just kind of hit some of those bullet points and tell them about your slave name and how it changed and why your name changed. And of course, tell us how you got to your freedom. Well, we're ready to start. So Ms. Kathryn, Mrs. Harris, Miss Harris, Mrs. Tubman, you're going to have about 25 minutes for your presentation. Let's get started.
All right. Well, you may remember, or maybe you don't remember, but I was born in Dorchester County, Maryland. I was born somewhere around 1820 to maybe 1823. Nobody really knows because nobody didn't care about slaves having a birthday. But nevertheless, I was born Araminta Green, Araminta Ross, because my papa's name was Benjamin Ross and my mama's name was Harriet Ross. Harriet Greenross. But in 1849, when I decided to take my freedom, that means I just walked away from my slave master in Dorchester County, Maryland. Well, I changed my name to Harriet to honor my mother, whose name, like I said, was also Harriet. But you know, when I got there to Philadelphia from Dorchester County, Maryland, I was by myself, and I had achieved what came to be my freedom, but I didn't have anyone to share it with. And it felt so good because when I got there to Philadelphia, I looked at my hands, I looked at my feet. They looked the same except for one thing. They was free. And so I enjoyed my freedom so much, but I was lonesome. I needed someone to share it with. So that's why I started making my trips back to the South to get my mama, my papa, my friends, and anyone else who wanted to be free, to get them to this wonderful place called freedom. So long about 1851 or so, that's when I started making my trips. Now, you see, when I got there to Philadelphia, I met a man whose name was Mr. William Still. Mr. Still was an important man. He was a colored man. And he was an important man because he was the secretary to the Anti-Slavery Society right there in Philadelphia. You see, my abolitionist friends who helped me with my escape, they told me to look for him. So I looked for him. I asked around and they told me where he was. So I went to introduce myself to him. And he was very, very kind. And he said, well, since you, Harriet, had made your own escape, then maybe he could make me a conductor on his railroad. So I stayed there for 2 years. And while I was there, I learned all about the workings of the Underground Railroad. And so in 1851, I started making those trips, like I said. And I went back, about 13 or 14 times. And I took scores of my people from slavery to freedom. And it was indeed risky. It was dangerous, but it was good. I took my brothers, my sisters, and anyone who wanted to come. And folks always ask, well, Miss Harriet, how did you get your passengers? And so this is how that worked. I would send word to one of my trusted abolitionist friends that I was going to be at a certain place at a certain time. And if you wanted to get on the Freedom Line, that's what we also called it, the Freedom Line, then you just be there at a certain time. And so people would come to that place. And the only thing that they had to do was to do as I say. Now, I did not pick these people. These people only knew that they wanted to be free. I couldn't go to no place and say, you can come, but you can't come. You can't come, but you can come. You know, like that, because only you know if you want to be free. But I have never known any slave that didn't have the desire to be free burning in his belly. But the only thing I ask is this, that you do as I say, because I am in charge. Because if you don't do it that way, then we're going to have a big problem. So then there are those who started on the travel with me. It was cold. It was dark. It was scary because you see, on the railroad, we traveled at night and we mostly hid in the day. Sometimes we would hide we'd hide wherever we could, but we had kindly abolitionist folks along the way who would take us in. But I myself, I've hid in the back of a wagon. I've even hid in a pig sty. Gets kind of messy right there with them pigs in the pig sty. So that was not a good thing either. But you know, you do what you have to do to get to your freedom. So, like I said, sometimes when we be on our way to freedom, some of my passengers, they get scared, they get tired, they get hungry, and they want to go back to master. So when that happens, and it does, sometimes I just have to reach in my bag. I just show it to you. This here's my bag. You see, it's got good stuff in it.
All right.
I have some stuff in it. Well, I have a little bit of whiskey. It's for medicinal purposes only. Then I have some paregoric. Now, I don't know if y'all know what paregoric is.
No, ma'am.
But it's you know, it's kind of like and I also have some laudanum. You know what laudanum is? Well, nevertheless, if you put it on like the tip of a handkerchief, or I think some of y'all might know about a poultice. You ever heard that word? A poultice. Anyway, you kind of make it wet, and if you put some paregoric or some laudanum on it, because you see, sometimes we traveled with babies, and what do babies do? Babies cry. And if you are trying to get to your freedom and you have a crying baby, then you subject to get caught, because the patrollers is going to be looking for you. And you know, that will not be a good thing if you're found, especially because of a crying baby. But you see, I never did say that nobody couldn't come if they had a baby with them, because the little children, they need to be free as well, so the whole family could come. So I have this paregoric or the laudanum, and you put it on like the end of a handkerchief or a rag, and you just kind of have the baby suck on it, and it just kind of puts him to sleep. And if you put enough of it on the end of a handkerchief, it'll make one of your not so obedient passengers fall into line, because they be kind of like in a haze. So sometimes though, they still get cold and tired and want to go back to master. So I reach in my bag, which I showed you. That's where that medicinal things are. And I also have what I call my friendly persuader. Now, do y'all know what a friendly persuader is? Sometimes I have to reach in my bag, pull it out, and I say, live free or die. I believe you might know what my friendly persuader is. Now, I have never had to use it on anybody, meaning I never did have to shoot none of my passengers, but it kind of kept them all in line, because they have to do as I say, because I'm the one that is in charge. In fact, John Brown, y'all know about John Brown. He had those fiery eyes and that flowing white hair. Folks thought he was kind of crazy, but he was a martyr for my people, because he didn't come to a good end. And literally, he came to his end at the end of a rope, because he was hanged. He was hanged for being a staunch, active, true abolitionist. Wanted to abolish that slavery thing. So he called me General Tubman, because I was in charge. And I had to let folks know that I was in charge, because if I didn't, all manner of things might go awry, and people have to do as I say. So on my trips, I made about 13 of them back to from Dorchester County to points south of there, to the Carolinas and to North Georgia, and picked up passengers. And if they came with me, then, like I said, they had to do as I said. Now, I have a book that's been written about me, and it's called Harriet Tubman. Now, I can neither read nor write, but I do have a book about me. And here's the book. It's a very nice book. You see, after the war, and after I made all those trips, because in the war, that'd be the Civil War, you know, I served in Mr. Lincoln's army. I served as a scout, a spy, and a nurse in Mr. Lincoln's army. And while I was in the army, see, here's my book. It's called, now I can neither read nor write, but I have memorized all the words on this page. And it's called Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman. That would be me, by Sarah H. Bradford. Now, I know y'all don't know who Sarah H. Bradford is, so I'm going to have to tell you. Sarah H. Bradford is a kind abolitionist woman, lived there in Auburn. That's Auburn, New York. You see, that's where I went at the close of the war, because that's where because the last passengers that I took, and I took most of my passengers all the way up into Canada, where they could truly be free. Because you see, Canada had outlawed that slavery thing years before the Civil War. And it was only in Canada that an escaping slave could truly be free, because back in 1850, the federal government had given out that fugitive slave law. And what that said was that any escaping slave, even if he is on free soil, he could be sold back into slavery. And that covered all of the United States. So that's why I took my passengers to Canada. The last passengers that I took to Canada was my mama and my papa. And so at the close of the war, I took them back across the falls. That be Niagara Falls. And I settled in Auburn, New York. And when I got there and got settled in Auburn, New York, why, that's where I met Sarah H. Bradford. And so she and I, we got to be very good friends. And so she wrote this book about me. It was printed in Auburn, Auburn, New York. W.J. Moses was the printer. You know, they called me Moses because I led people to freedom. And I thought it was kind of really quite something that the printer is called W.J. Moses too. And this book was wrote in 1869. And see, it even has my picture in it. I think it's a very nice picture of me. Looks kind of much like me. Now, some people say, well, Harriet, why do you have on those glasses? You don't have no glasses on in the picture. Well, you know, you get old, your vision kind of gets a little bit worse. So that's why I have the glasses on. So even though I got this book, I can't read it, but people have also asked me, did I know Frederick? Y'all know who Frederick is? That Frederick. Absolutely, Miss Teresa. Frederick Douglass. And so folks have asked me, what was you friends with him? Well, yes, I know him mighty well. I know him mighty well. In fact, he wrote a little piece in this book. And so like I said, I have remembered it, certain parts of it, because they make me feel very proud. And in this book, there's a letter from Frederick, which Frederick wrote in 1868. And it kind of ends like this. You know, when I was a child, I used to catch muskrats. Y'all know what muskrats is. They live in the water and you catch them in a steel trap. I used to do that with my papa. And my mama told me that I had a mind like a steel trap. That means I have a very good memory. So at the end of this, excuse me, at the end of this letter, it says, "It is such a great pleasure and a great privilege to bear testimony to your character." He's talking about me. "And your works, and to say to those whom may come that I regard you in every way truthful and trustworthy." Because sometimes folks didn't believe all the things I told them about some of the things that I done. So this what would you call it? This testimony from Frederick, you know, it's in the front part of my book. Y'all probably heard of Wendell Phillips and Thomas Garrett. They was other kindly abolitionist folks. And you know that those Quakers, they were always involved for peace, and they was definitely against that slavery thing. They called it that peculiar institution. I've always wondered why they called it that, but after I thought about it, it is kind of peculiar to have one folks be in charge of somebody and you know, and work them from sun up to sundown and don't never get paid. So that does make it kind of peculiar. But I'm glad that I'm glad that with that war and with Father Abraham, that be President Lincoln, you know, I served in his military there, like I said. When he gave out that proclamation back there in 1863, wow, that was a step, a big step, trying to make people be on the same level. But, well, we'll see how that turns out over the years. But Father Abraham, between the war and the win that came to the Union and that proclamation, then all those slaves got to be free. Someone told me that in 1860, that's when they do the census, that there was 3 million slaves being held in slavery in the South and those border states. So come the end of the war, we all got to be free. But I'm gonna brag about something. I don't know if brag is the truth, because it's the right word, because it's just the truth. I am the only woman who has ever successfully led a military campaign. And that was on the Combahee River there in South Carolina. And me, with the help of General Saxon and General Montgomery, we raided this huge plantation where they planted rice and indigo and all kind of crops for which you could get money. Boy, we raided that place, burned down the plantation, burned up the fields and everything. And more than 700 folks got free on that campaign. And I, Harriet Tubman, was the leader. And ain't no woman ever done nothing quite that great since, so far as I know. That's what folks have told me, that it was really something. Well, after the war, I settled there in Auburn, New York, and I brung my mama and my papa back, and we settled there. So now, mostly I just think about, I reflect on the work that I done on the railroad, and sometimes I have speaking engagements, and like Miss Sarah H. Bradford, she wrote a book about me. So I just think about the work, and it was hard work, risky work, and dangerous work, but I was mighty glad that I done it. So, well, what do you think about my story now, Miss Teresa?
I think it's a wonderful story. I was sitting here thinking, because we're getting ready to wrap up. And one of the questions that I do have before we do wrap up is, how many of the people that you did bring to freedom, how many of them did you stay in contact with? Or were they so, did everyone go to so many different places that you just didn't keep track? Or how did that happen?
Well, one of the things after the war, I did keep up with some of them, but it was very hard. But one of the things that come from the close of the war was the Freedmen's Bureau that gave aid and assistance to those former slaves. And so it was through there that I tried to find, like, my one sister who was lost to me, that I never saw again. I never did see her again. But it was there at the Freedmen's Bureau that I met my Nelson, Nelson Davis. Nelson Davis was in the United States Colored Troops, which was formed because of that proclamation that Father Abraham gave out in 1863. So me and Nelson, we got married, and we got married in the Christian way, because me and John Tubman, well, when I went back to see him, he took up with another woman. So that was all of me and John Tubman. But after the war, I met my Nelson, and we got married up in a Christian way. We got married in a church right there in Auburn, New York. And me and Nelson, I told you he served in the United States Colored Troops. Now on to 200,000 of my people served in the United States Colored Troops and the United States Navy during the course of that Civil War thing. So we fought, bled, and died right alongside them Union soldiers and them Union sailors. But because we worked for our freedom. Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. Mm-hmm.
So before we close, I just want to ask one question. Mm-hmm. Why did you never... Now, we know you as Mrs. Harriet Tubman. Mm-hmm. Why didn't we know you as Mrs. Harriet Nelson?
Because really, Nelson Davis, that was his name. His name was Nelson Davis.
Oh, Mrs. Davis, okay.
Uh-huh. He was proud to be married to Harriet Tubman.
Okay.
And so he was a big man, big in his thinking, you see. And some people called him Mr. Harriet Tubman. So, but he was proud, and he know that, and people who knew us, they knew we was married up. So
yeah,
I guess that's the way I can answer that question.
And
he was proud to be married to me, and he was big enough that, he didn't care.
Good. So probably it's because after I asked it, I thought people knew you as the abolitionist, as the person who carried them to freedom as Tubman. So if they would have come out talking about Harriet Nelson, people would have been like, well, who's that?
Exactly.
So, well, you know what? As I close, I just want to thank you, Mrs. Harriet Tubman, for sharing your insights and experiences. And I want to thank you, Ms. Kathryn Harris, for sharing your beautiful and wonderful gift with us. We appreciate your time and the valuable contributions that you continue to make to your communities and Illinois. And to our audience, we thank you for joining us for this enlightening presentation. Now, you remember the power to create positive change lies with each of us. And we saw that, and we remember this every time we hear the story of Mrs. Harriet Tubman. Let's continue the dialogue and work together for a more equitable and just future. So once again, thank you all for joining AARP Illinois today, and we look forward to continuing our mission supporting seniors, caregivers, and the entire aging community in Illinois. If you would like more information on AARP and their upcoming virtual events or volunteering with us, please visit aarp.org/ Illinois. Again, that's aarp.org/Illinois. Well, I'm Teresa Jones, your host, and we want to thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day. And this concludes our virtual event. Goodbye.